welcome back to the hot seat. I'm delighted today to be joined by Marcus Parker, partner from Harbottle and Lewis in London. Welcome, Marcus.
Thank you very much, David.
So you're well known on the circuit here in London, but for those PCD members or others who don't know about yourself and Harbottle and Lewis, it'd be great to hear a little bit about you and the firm.
Of course, yes. I mean, I joined them in April of last year. As you know, and many others will know, I was out in the Cayman Islands for just over 8 years, wearing the hat as a trustee rather than as a lawyer. And it's interesting to see, obviously, both sides, and we can probably explore that later. Yeah. But joined Harbottles as it's a fantastic private client-focused firm. I mean, essentially, the firm is a big private client firm because the individual is really the heart of everything we do. But we do everything for that individual, whether it's a corporate matter or litigation, reputation management, divorce. I always find my job as a private client lawyer is very much about solving problems, trying to find ways to help people.
Okay, and you're a specialist around succession planning, wealth preservation. There's a lot of threats today in the world on a variety of aspects. What do you think is driving wealth preservation and succession planning trends at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, for our clients, it's all about wealth preservation because they've already created their wealth. It doesn't mean they don't want to grow further, but they don't want to certainly see a shrinking pile. There's obviously lots of threats to the preservation of wealth, and in the old days we'd have thought of things like divorce, family disputes, but then of course things like the pandemic came along and we started worrying about that, and actually for many people during that period of time their wealth grew rather than shrunk. For those, and there was really a disparity between those at the top and those at the bottom. Of course, the current issue is the terrible stories in Ukraine and the attack on Russians and the sanctions, which has fundamentally changed the game for many people, including for lawyers who advise those kinds of people.
And when times are tough, inevitably disputes arise. Those who are the custodian stewards of assets on behalf of families might find themselves in the crosshairs. What are you seeing in terms of trust disputes? Yeah,
there's a lot of them, and some of them are really quite huge. Many people watching this will be aware of the Wong and Wang dispute in Bermuda, which is a huge global trust dispute. But we're seeing certainly families still falling out with each other over big sums of money. We're seeing people really sort of press at their trustees and other fiduciaries when they feel that they haven't done something right, and they're certainly prepared to challenge those decisions in the courts. And we're seeing more what I would call geopolitical issues, where there are clients who have either fallen out of favour with their regimes or are opposed to their regimes, and they're being pursued by them. We've seen that in the Middle East. I think we will see more of that in other jurisdictions. We're obviously seeing with Russians in a different way.
And do you think beneficiaries are better educated on their rights and their claims against trustees are becoming more prevalent or sophisticated? They're reading more about what they can be entitled to? Or do you think, does that create more dispute?
I think that's right. I mean, access to good lawyers is important for lawyers to explain what those beneficiaries can do. But certainly wealthy beneficiaries are not shy at taking a pop at trust companies or at other fiduciaries or at other family members. So I think we'll see more and more of that. And of course, these disputes don't just happen in one jurisdiction. They often happen in 5, 6, 7 different jurisdictions.
So the trustees need access to good legal counsel to help them de-risk their business, because otherwise they're on the hook for, they're liable for different things, different jurisdictions, so they need to be able to access good counsel.
Absolutely, and I mean the key to this is finding the right coordinator, and often people turn to London because there's obviously a wealth of quality private client professionals here, and in turn we find the right professionals to act, whether it's in Cayman or Jersey or whatever other jurisdiction is involved.
And what about on the transparency agenda? What's the latest there?
A lot's changed. I mean, we've seen in the last couple of weeks this acceleration of the public beneficial ownership register in the UK, and they haven't quite got it right on the first draft, and they said they're going to improve it on the second draft. We haven't got to a public beneficial ownership register in the offshore jurisdictions yet, but of course with everything that's happened around Russia and the sanctions, that may well be accelerated too. But I think the problem is that when legislation is passed quickly, it's often full of mistakes, and I think we've seen that in the current round. The government said they're going to fix that, but of course it's not a watertight solution.
And has the pandemic prompted clients to review structures to look at the different moving parts under structure rationalise and consolidate in certain jurisdictions. You know, perhaps flight to quality.
Yeah.
The benefit of having these sprawling structures is not what it was. So are you seeing that coming through?
Very much so. I think that's almost a central theme. I think what the pandemic did do was cause people to reflect on where they wanted to be. And of course, we're talking about wealthy families who have a base in lots of different jurisdictions. They may be residents in one or more jurisdictions. They're thinking carefully about where they want to be, recognising the borders can close at any moment, that their movements can be restricted. However many private jets you have, if you can't fly them off and land in another jurisdiction, it's no good. People are thinking about their families and their accessibility to their families. So it's really concentrating people's minds on that. I think the other point about jurisdictions and the flight to quality is related to that, but is almost a different one too, because we're certainly seeing the need for restructures of quite old structures which don't quite work in the modern era. And people are thinking about whether they need to have a myriad of companies in lots of different jurisdictions or whether they can simplify that. So if we're setting up new structures, it's often simplified. If we're looking at old structures, there is, I mean, you've seen the old structure charts where there's sort of 80 entities on a structure chart. I think those days have gone somewhat, and there's a real desire to look carefully at each jurisdiction, think whether it's the right jurisdiction, whether a particular entity is required, and then act accordingly. Sometimes it's quite difficult to unwind these or to change these structures, but that's our job to try and work it out.
Sure. I mean, do you think the UK remains an attractive place for high net worth individuals to come and live and invest? The non-dom regime offers great opportunities, perhaps for restructuring even. Do you still see that, the demand for the UK from high net worth clients around the world?
Yeah, I mean, again, the pandemic has accelerated this thinking of where to go. And over the years, I've been doing this for 20 odd years, I'm often asked the questions, where's the best place to live? And it really depends on the individual. But when you come down to all of the options like London or Switzerland or Cayman or Monaco, a lot of people still come back to the fact that London is the place they want to be. And of course, there's an advantageous tax regime if you're a non-dom. London obviously is at the centre of things. You can fly in and out most of the times without pandemics, and you have so much here. Obviously, having lived in Cayman and returned, I realise how much more there is to do in London, and it is a really fabulous base. But with all places, you need to be able to go to other places for the variety. But London is obviously the hub from a transport perspective.
And do you think that global mobility has changed also through the pandemic? People realising they can run businesses and be a bit more mobile, perhaps live somewhere else that they hadn't considered possible before. We're starting to emerge from the pandemic now, and people are realising some of these plans. Are you seeing that in action?
Absolutely. I mean, flexibility has come to the fore during the pandemic, and I mean, literally, you can work from anywhere in the world on a Zoom or a Teams call or in another way. And lots of jurisdictions took advantage of that to say, well, actually, you can come here on a limited visa. I know Cayman did, I think the Maldives did, and people therefore decamped to where they wanted to be. They sat on the beach or around the pool, and they connected in the same way as if they were in their office in New York or London. And I think it's great progress. And in my career, I never thought we'd see a day where we were working as flexibly as we are now. And different people work in different ways. So, I mean, it's a great way to ensure that everybody's happy in a work environment.
And Harbottles as a firm have got expertise around new styles of assets, digital assets, partly because of the client base that you have. But, I mean, is that a growing area, do you think, for trustees to start to master, to understand, because their clients are demanding more of them? Is this activity you're seeing coming through from the professional side? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, at Harbottles, we tend to act for a younger, more entrepreneurial client. We're very well known for our creative client base, for our media and entertainment clients, and who are usually very mobile, very flexible. They want quick advice, they want good advice, and those they come to us because we can provide that kind of advice.
Okay. And, I mean, obviously you mentioned at the top, coming from a long spell in Cayman. I mean, what is it that you think marks Cayman out as being unique in the client base that you work with? What are the sort of go-to signals where someone might utilise Cayman structures or residency options, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Cayman's a fantastic jurisdiction. It's a lovely place to live. It has both Englishness and Americanisms to it, which make it an ideal place to live, and the weather's great. You also don't pay tax, and people have questioned my sanity in returning to a taxing jurisdiction. Cayman's really important because it obviously has it's rooted as a British independent territory. It's safe and secure, has quality professionals, It has a judiciary that respects trusts. So actually, if you end up in being in a dispute involving a trust structure, Cayman is an ideal place in order to litigate. You obviously don't want to get to that point. Cayman has a number of structures that you can use. They have star trusts, which are very flexible. They now have foundation companies, which again is a sort of a hybrid between a company and a trust, and can be used in different circumstances. Flexibility is key in planning a structure, and Cayman has all the tools to be able to do that.
And what do you think on a lot of trustees now talking more about sustainable investing, ESG? Are these themes that you're seeing coming through into your practice area, clients wanting to incorporate this more in how they manage assets or make investments, considerations around ESG?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's talking about ESG. Yeah. People are trying to understand what it is. I mean, it has different meanings to lots of different people. Trustees are actively considering whether they should be invested in ESG. I think there is a need in the offshore jurisdictions in order to look at their legislation to make sure that trustees are protected should they wish to invest in this type of investment. I know there's lots of work going on. We're involved in that with offshore jurisdictions to help them out on that. But yes, trustees actively need to be considering whether their portfolio should contain those kinds of investment. The other hot topic, of course, is crypto, which is very different to ESG, and you talked about it previously. Again, clients want to talk about crypto all the time. A very different consideration for trustees there, given it's such a high-risk, volatile asset, but something that can't be ignored anymore.
Okay, great. Well, look, great to talk to you today, Marcus. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.